Obviously, I have this, you started to interview first name, somebody's last name, everything else and stuff, right? I'd love to know, and I had no idea. I always knew you were artistic, even back when we went to school and stuff like that. You were a painter, you were the referee at some of my boxing matches that I certainly did.
I mentioned that recently, too.
Yeah,
yep.
And that were totally illegal, even though we had two cops that showed up to the thing, but apparently they didn't know the laws well enough. How the hell did you get into this?
Well, the story of getting into toys is kind of a long one. As a kid, obviously, I was very gravitated towards the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I bought that line. I was also into the He-Man line before that. So these were things that came naturally to me as a child, of loving these larger-than-life things that you could manipulate and do things with. I love to take them outside and bury them. At one point, Moss Man had real moss on him. So that was something that I gravitated to as a younger kid. When the 2000 boom of like McFarlane toys, they were producing horror, and at that time I was very fascinated with, Freddy Krueger, all the main characters, and he was doing what was called movie maniacs. And to me, that seemed like such a cool thing to hang on the wall. At the time, there was more of the mint on box, they call collector. They keep them in the box, they make sure they're displayed on the wall because the graphics are cool, and the characters at the time didn't really have much mobility. They were more focused on them looking screen accurate, and they came with like a movie poster such. So that trend went on for a while, and I still had some of these laying around my house, but the big change came when, at the time I was living with two guys. I was living with me. I was doing hip hop for a while, and I had a rap partner. We were living together. Another one of my friends, Dave, he had a circumstance where he was living with his cousin, and they did an inside job and kind of robbed him, sort of thing. So instantly I allowed him to come in and live with me, and he is a massive comic book collector. So for the toys aspect, I had that. For the comic book aspect, he had that, but he also collected toys and I also collected comics. So together we had a very impressive collection together in the house that I liked to display. So I came up with this idea that I would write a script, something that we could do a movie, represent Saginaw, represent collectors, yada yada. So I actually did write it. It's called I Don't Want to Grow Up. I incorporated a lot of people that were in my life at the time, and obviously the story is about two guys who were down on their luck. The main character being me was a similar situation where I was dating a girl, didn't work out so well, and I really wanted to find something to fill my time with so I wouldn't concentrate on that situation. So in doing so, I wrote that into the script, but I wrote the character as much more depressed about the situation than I currently was. It sells better on a film to have the arc be a little bit more, convoluted for the character. And I wrote it where he was basically a vagabond, quit all his jobs, but rent's due, obviously. So the one grand scheme he could think of was to start selling his collection, selling Dave's comics. At the time, we had a few places locally where you could do that. You could sell your comics or sell your toys, etc. And I had written all these into the script and everything, but in production of it, I looked at the house, and it was not this place, but it was a little bit bigger, and I felt if you're gonna do a movie like that, you need to fill it up more. You need to have more open toys, stuff to display, more posters, etc. So I spent that year writing the script and actually buying more toys and equipment as well. So I got lights, cameras, all this stuff that I'm getting ready to shoot the film for. Complications arose in shooting, timing, my work schedule, But in the meantime, I really started to open these toys for the first time and really being able to manipulate them and having all this equipment. I said to myself, well, you can take photos of this. You can start putting these on Instagram and using what hashtags were very niche at the time. This is in 2011, I want to say. And I knew people were doing creative things with toys. At the time, I had I started an Instagram for that because I knew that just releasing a movie in Saginaw wasn't enough. I needed to have more of a global scale. And that's kind of what slowed the production as well, because I wanted to build a fan base that was outside, so maybe other people would be interested in playing the film just because it was about the things that they loved. So, like I said, that never got made, but in the production of that, I started taking the toys and putting it on Instagram, and you learn that there's all these avenues on Instagram to gain more notoriety, and the posters and stuff like that weren't getting me as many likes as when I was doing like toys. And I would use all these really ghetto apps that were available at the time that you could put effects on them and all these digital things to it. So it brought the childlikeness, but in a more creative, real world aspect of my life.
Let me redirect you for a moment if I can. You're a creative guy in so many different aspects of your life. You write and produce music. I know you were an artist back in the day. Actually, I remember in high school, you drawing hands.
Absolutely.
You had gone through and drawn hands, and you actually, I remember this conversation one time. You pulled me over in the hallway, and you were like, you know what, hands are so expressive, because really when you think about it, yeah, you have the facial recognition of an individual, and you can tell their faces, but it's like if you're a fist, you're angry. If you're pointing at something, you might be angry or very direct with something, right? So you've always had a different sort of view of these sort of things. And even in your day job, you're a cook, right?
Absolutely.
And where you cook, you always I remember the last time I ran into, probably about 2 years ago, you were always coming up with new dishes, new recipes, stuff like that you'd post, right? So you're a creative person. How did you focus all of this energy into making these figurines, which are time consuming as fuck? I think nobody really has an idea of how to make
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the time that it takes.
I mean, it's taken me 10 years alone to be able to make eyes. Eyes are seemingly the most difficult part of the painting aspect, but painting's only one avenue into customizing. It's the difference between there's 6-inch figures, and in the 6-inch figures you have all the plastic that's rendered as the clothes. So this becomes a little bit more difficult because you're using Mod Podge or different aspects to make the clothes. Instead of with the 12-inch figures, you have more of the cloth material. So the cloth material allows you to create the realism a little bit better. Getting back to more of your question, it's just a matter of what do you want in your life? Do you want to be the type of person that spends most of their time hanging out with friends, watching movies, and just letting life kind of exist? It's the same thing I tell to people when they are big video game heads. I realize that's a lot of fun and it's somewhat creative, but at the same time, you're not putting your mark out there. In my life, I've surrounded myself with things that give me inspiration. Pop culture, art, everything expressive, everything that shows true depth of feeling. And that fills me with such an interesting energy that I feel like the only way to get that out there is to put my take on it.
There's going to be people at home that watch this, see the quality of your work. That, by the way, I'm fucking taken aback and highly impressed with. If I weren't, I wouldn't fucking be here, obviously, right? Because I'm like balls to the wall busy with shit right now. What do you charge if somebody calls you and says, hey, I want a 6-inch figurine or 8-inch figurine? I mean, what
it's
is that?
So difficult because there's so many things that are in that process. And the one thing that I've been doing is I've been doing it very reasonably priced. Like almost everybody has been getting the homie hookup, because not only it's leaving me humble, but I'm allowing there to be more customers. and to learn in that process. So I've done a lot of homie hookups, but at the particular point, I recently quit my day job so I could make this more of a reality, because I've been doing it for so long that I feel it's at the point of actually making money at it. So 6-inch figure, it depends on if I have most of the pieces, which I do. I have an entire basement that would scare you with dioramas and extra parts and whatever. So if I have most of the parts to make the base of the figure, it becomes easy at that point. It becomes some relatively $60 to $100. You're getting into your 12-inch figures. It depends on some of these clothes you have to order from Japan. When you get them, you have to dye them, you have to, color them to a degree. Some of the head sculpts that people want are in themselves crazy amounts of expensive. And sometimes you can find painted versions, sometimes you can't find painted versions. When people want customs of themselves, that's where it becomes really fun, because you're bringing in so many elements of them instead of getting away from a character.
The norm, the base, right?
Right.
The baseline, right? Where is the next 2 to 3 to 5 years for Jarod? What is the goal as far as, and let me infuse this into the question, do you want a production company from LA to be able to contact you and say, hey, I want you to recreate this sort of stuff? Obviously, you're a fan of I grew up on fucking Freddy, right?
Yeah, that's my main man.
That's my dude, right?
That's
my guy, right? But is it that? Is it just the fact that you love the art and the process so much the way that I love films? I'm not chasing money, because some of the stories I produce, like, people don't want to walk away depressed, and that's what I'm going to leave you with, right?
Right.
So is it about the art? Is it about the money? It sounds like when everybody's still getting the homie hookup, that it's more about right now the art and the process.
Always about the art. It's always about giving back, but at the same time, you have to put yourself in a position of saying, like, do I want to work another shitty job in order to have this, or do I think I can have this? I have, at this point, because of Instagram, built a huge base of people that I work with and can work with. I have a guy who goes by the name of Snow Horse, who does stop motion.
I never gave up on you. I called you every night. Talked about you pretty much every day.
I've done stop motion, I have some of it out there, I like it. It's very time consuming. So for me, a connection that I've recently built with him works very good, where he wants customized clothing and figurines to a degree, but he also wants my music and my editing and my timing skills put in there as well. So I know it's kind of weird to be a jack of all trades and a master of none, but that's where I feel like, because of my ADHD, I want to put so many things out there, and at the same time, it's easier to have a fully completed project if you're able to do these things. I can make a poster for the movie, I can make the sound for a movie, I can make the clothes for the movie, etc.
A lot of people believe in that jack of all trades, master of none. And now you're talking to a guy also that I write music.
Exactly.
Other people perform it. I make films, obviously. I've covered boxing, I've covered dancers, I do photography work, and I also paint, right? Sometimes you have to step away from that a little bit to be able to focus on one thing to do it well. Now, I would argue that actually in the process of being a jack of all trades, you become a master of a few, and are actually working towards that, right?
Right.
But even this house, when I pull up into it, is an art piece in and of itself.
It is.
I mean, when you look at it, right?
It is.
And
every time I get like a delivery or something, the guy's always like, holy shit, you must do this up for Halloween, you know?
This house is like an art museum.
Absolutely.
And in addition to that, that I think keeps you inspired. Let's touch on one thing that you just brought up that I didn't even know. We talk about the whole ADHD, and I get OCD and probably have ADHD also, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're taking that and channeling it into
actual products. There's a difference between, I guess, me and other people. I'm a releaser. I try not to do so many projects that don't come out. You know, I have 2 albums that are available on every streaming platform right now under VHS OST, which is an 80s group that I have with another friend of mine named Brian, who lives out of Austin, Texas. I produce amount of photos, I create videos for YouTube, etc. The one thing that still nips at my butt is that movie. I've taken it was actually a 90s movie. Took 2 90s movies that were shot in the exact same year, fucked them together, and replaced every single sound in the entire picture. It's called Kick Butt the Movie.
But here's a bunch of videos. I want you to take these home and watch them all. And make sure you take notes. I don't want you fast forwarding to all the cum shots. These are due back at Blockbuster on Friday. Don't be late. I already got a bunch of late fees.
It's on YouTube. It's very crazy, but that was in itself amazing. To do Foley, to do the music, and to do every single character's voice.
Two things you touched on. Fully recording, right? I fell in love with that shit the moment I saw it, and I started incorporating it into my news stories immediately because you get bad sound. Sometimes you get like wind not blowing outside, you get all sorts of shit, and you have to recreate that whole thing. But let's talk about how wonderful of an inspiration these characters have become. Like, most people don't sit there and think, my son's 8 years old or 9 years old or 10 watching Freddy Krueger, that it's a good thing.
Right.
Yet,
I was that kid though. In 1987, I saw a stand-up cardboard cutout of Freddy for Nightmare 2. In 1989, I saw number 4. These things, like, my parents were never the type of parents to say, like, we had HBO in 1989. I saw RoboCop. I saw Tales from the Crypt. I saw all these things that most kids shouldn't or are mostly known as not being able to see. Like, oh, that's too terrible for you to see. I was born in 1982. I watched these in 1989. I have never committed any murders. I'm not violent in any sort of way. I'm almost a pacifist. I've taken martial arts and boxing, all these things, but it's more for a self-preservation sort of deal. But that's always been the biggest thing for me, is these movies and these films and these characters, because they're a part of my life just as much as it is the filmmakers. It's been in my life most of my existence, and I love filling myself with those things that bring me to my childhood, but allow me to still be an adult.
The Dude and Walter.
Right over there. That's
favorites.
how this whole thing of the 12-inch started. A friend of mine sent me The Dude. I liked it, but his clothing was all brand new. It looked like he just bought it. I'm like, I don't want that version of The Dude. The other problem was, you can't have The Dude without Walter. So that was the biggest painstaking custom for me to try to make, because they didn't make a John Goodman. Nobody made anything close to that. And that was, for me, the biggest struggle, because number one, it's hard to do a fat custom, which I learned how to do several ways now. But that was how it all started, because you had to buy and make so many things for Walter, so many different things. That's how I learned how to dye the clothes on the figures to make it look dirty, to make it look worn, to add that realism. And for me, I think that's how this whole thing gets sold more. I'm into the grimy aspects of worlds and realities. I don't have the best furniture. I have decent furniture, but at the same time, that's what I want my characters to have. You're not gonna have Walter and the Dude having a brand new couch that looks like it's never been worn before. That's not how it works. You have to have them in their element, and that's what I love doing the most.
Why are you so passionate about it?
Because I chose this instead of life. I don't hang out with people for the most part. I don't really date for the most part. And not having kids. That's always provided me with so much more time than your average person does. So I feel like it's a responsibility, not a crutch. It would have been different if I had all those things. I'm not dissing on anybody who has chosen that life, but my life has steered me towards that life. And I feel like if I have this time and I'm not creating and I'm not putting things out there, then I'm going to be sad, lonely, and actually depressed. Whereas I'm not. I'm absolutely fine. I have all the fun. Most people that are married and have children are like, I'm so jealous of your life. But it's like, it's not easy to do that because all of my best friends, I've not met them. They're all on social media sites, we Skype, we text, but that also is good for me because it's not allowing me to just go over their house and sit there and talk to them forever and waste time. I can sit there and talk to them and make a couch. I can sit there and talk to them and organize my house, you know, make things in my life better.
Let's be honest about one thing. You've known me for 25 years.
Absolutely.
On and off. Obviously, I was in the military. I've been out of Michigan for 20-some years. I've traveled to 30-some different countries. I still do. My goal is 4 new countries a year, right, which is what I'm doing. And it was still, I felt like a little bit hard to get me in here to interview you.
Really?
Did you not or no?
Oh, because of my timing?
Like timing, and I felt like when I contacted you, you were like, okay, well, where do you want to go with this and whatever.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Well, because like that, like I want to know that it's for obviously like the same reason that I want it to be. You know, I'm very selective on what I choose to be put out there. Like I don't post on Facebook because I want my life to be more of revolved around art. I don't want people to be like, oh, he's bitching about the weather and he's bitching about this. Like I want my whole life to be this big cocoon bubble of art and experience and what I view as reality.
I tell people all the time, one of the best ways, certainly I lived through this, cancer, being diagnosed with cancer 3 years ago for me was the single most positive experience in my life, right? Because it allowed me to strip away the inessential. It said, well, you don't know how much time you have, what are you going to do with it? I don't think I would have moved to Portugal had I not had cancer. It would have just been a pipe dream. You keep putting off and putting off. Next thing you know, 10 years fucking later, you still haven't been there, right? So I always tell people, work on your own eulogy. Don't sit down and write the whole thing, but what are people going to say about you when you are no longer here and you're in a casket and whatever?
Absolutely. And that for me has been the #1 goal too. As you said, I'm a chef and I have dedicated my time to being in Old Town, who I felt has raised me in Saginaw. I don't think that I would have enjoyed this town nearly as much without that experience in Old Town. So for me, being able to give back, because not everybody's into the toy thing, but for me, I'm into inspiring. I'm into making people feel like they can be in a big city, even though they're in Saginaw, by experiencing a different side of the food that I create. And that's the same passion that goes almost into the toys. Granted, it pays a little better because everybody's got to eat. It's more consistent. I've worked at that even longer than I've technically been working at this hobbyistic version of toys. So always for me is seeing the appreciation of people. That's my #1 goal. Ever since I was a kid, my mother has always raised me to be humble, but also to be out there. My grandma, when she was still alive, when we were kids, she was a big nativity scene collector. At Christmas, she would have everything like trees and houses and snow and all these things, and she could draw so amazing. So for me, I grew up on that side, and my mother used to make mop dolls. She used to do custom t-shirts. So it's literally been ingrained into me.
Last question, and I want to end on this. Personal happiness to you is?
Doing my passion, making the music, communicating with like Brian, my best friend, online, talking with people who generally love what I do. And I know that sounds very egotistical and inward, but I'm so inspired. So when I'm able to put that same energy out there, and especially where someone can contact me, because you have these people that you hold. I've seen Robert Englund. I choked on meeting him. Like I couldn't meet him. I'm like I just can't. It's too much for me. So for me to be like low on the totem pole, but still have where people are just like blown away. Whether it be the food that I make, whether it's the custom that I make, whether it's the song that they heard, yada, yada, yada. That for me gets me through the day, because I know that I'm making people happy, even if it's for 5 minutes, even if it's for 10 minutes. And if they remember it, like you do, you're remembering all these things that I've done, and you could tell a legacy for me if you wanted to. And that's such a beautiful thing.